The Order of the Mother had guided the world for thousands of years. Moshe was the first to hear her voice upon the mountain, receiving the laws of balance. They were the principles of care and reciprocity, preserved in stone tablets. It was not a rule of womb or bloodline, but of stewardship, where a system was built on memory, relationship, and the rhythm of care that held communities together. Councils of women governed not through decree, but through consensus, measuring authority by wisdom, not inheritance. Men and women both served the order, but the lineage of leadership flowed through teaching and responsibility rather than descent. In this world, conquest was seen as a failure and a loss of harmony. To lead was to maintain the balance that held opposing forces in dialogue. Knowledge was sacred, and libraries stood where temples once had. The preservation of truth was considered a higher act of devotion than victory. The mother was not imagined as a biological being, but as principle itself. She was the pulse of life and connection that moved through all things. Yet even in a world of order and care, power can grow rigid. Over time, the councils of mothers became guardians not only of wisdom, but of control. What began as a covenant of balance hardened into hierarchy until questioning the council was seen as questioning the mother herself. It was into this world that Jesua was born, not to overturn it, but to remind it what balance truly meant. Jesua of Nazara was born into a family of artisans. One of a virgin, Josen, born without seed and blessed among men, became the bearer of the mother's promise that creation was not divided by gender, but shared by all who opened themselves to her spirit. Her mother, Anathea, called Maria among the elders, was a weaver in the temple workshops, known for her stillness and her gift of listening. It was said that when the mother's breath passed through her, she did not bow, but breathed in harmony with it. Her father tended the communal gardens, a role held in equal respect within the mother's order. On the night of her birth, 3 travellers, scholars of the mother's constellations, arrived from the eastern provinces. They carried gifts of salt, water, and woven cloth. They were the symbols of endurance, renewal, and connection. They said, "We have read the movement of the stars. A daughter is born who will remind the world that the mother's light belongs to all." Anathea listened in silence, her child sleeping against her breast. She said, "Then may she grow to serve, not to rule." And the women who were gathered answered, "So be it. Let her teaching be the balance of all things." From an early age, Jesua was drawn to the study houses where the matrons taught the histories of civilization. She listened closely, but her questions often unsettled her teachers. The young Jesua wanted to know why the councils spoke of balance while forbidding debate, why the laws of harmony were written but never re-examined, and why compassion, once the root of their teaching, was now measured by conformity. The elders said her mind moved too quickly, that she sought to unweave what was already perfect. As she grew, Jesua saw that the order's peace was held together by silence, and that those who disagreed were simply absent from record. In her travels between towns, she met men who had been barred from the temples, accused of restless thinking, and young women who dreamed of teaching but were told that the councils were already full. The more she listened, the more she believed that the mother's law had forgotten the living mother herself. Jesua began to speak in public gatherings, reading the old hymns aloud and inviting others to share their understanding. She said that the mother's voice was not confined to councils or temples, but could rise wherever understanding was shared. To some, she was a renewal of the ancient spirit of wisdom. To others, she was dangerous, and a reminder that even in a world led by women, power could still harden into dogma. When Jesua reached her 30th year, she left Nazara and began to travel between the provinces. She taught places where ordinary people gathered, not in temples, but in gardens, markets and workshops. In those days, many spoke of Johanna the water-bearer, who stood in the rivers cleansing the people in the spirit of the mother, calling them back to wholeness. Jesua's teaching was said to rise from that same current of renewal. Her message was simple but unsettling, that wisdom was not a possession of the councils, but a living current that moved through all who sought truth. One dawn, Jesua walked by the lake of Galilee, where women cast their nets in silence. Seeing their weariness, she said, "There is another kind of net, one that gathers not fish, but people." Miriam of Magdala stepped forward, and with her the others left their baskets to follow. Jesua called more from their work, a potter, a midwife, a widow who taught children, until 12 women travelled beside her. People called them the weavers of the net, for wherever they went they gathered the scattered and bound them again to community. Jesua said, "Follow me, and we will cast our nets not for fish, but for those who have forgotten their belonging." She spoke of the mother not as ruler but as relationship, the living space between all beings where understanding is born. "The mother is not law," she said. "She is life, and life must keep learning." To the artisans, she spoke of the holiness of work. To the farmers, she spoke of the rhythm between sowing and rest. To the healers, she spoke of the balance between care and release. When she passed through a place, the air grew clear and alive, and those nearby felt their hearts lift without knowing why. She laid her hands upon the sick, and they were healed. She called to the dead, and they rose, for her voice carried the breath of the mother. Once they brought to her a woman who had been blind since childhood. As the crowd debated whether her affliction was curse or fate, Jesua said, "You speak as though sight were in the eyes alone. Yet how many among you see and do not understand?" She touched the woman's face and whispered, "The mother's light was never taken from you." When the woman opened her eyes, she said, "I see not only faces, but the life that connects them." Another time, the councils brought before her a man accused of selling his body in the temple districts, a crime punishable by exile. They said, "He defiles the sacred." Jesua asked, "Has he harmed where there was consent?" They answered, "He has sold himself for survival." Jesua replied, "Then it is not he who has sinned, but the world that made his need a shame." And she said to the man, "Your worth is not for purchase. Go, and let the mother be your lady and your home." Jesua's followers came from across society, temple scribes disillusioned by ceremony, men who longed for greater voice in communal life, and young women who wished to teach. She did not stand above them, but sat among them, saying that truth lives in the space we share, not on any throne. Her teachings began to spread, carried by those who repeated her parables. They were stories of understanding, belonging, and of daughters who were lost and found again in the light. The councils of mothers watched her rise with unease. To them, her words sounded dangerously close to disorder, a world where authority rested not on lineage or office, but on awareness and love. Still, Jesua continued, saying, "Every time we meet in understanding, the mother's love grows within us." Her gatherings grew, not because she promised salvation, but because she offered permission and the freedom to question without fear. And that, more than anything, threatened the peace built on silence. As Jesua's teachings spread, the councils of mothers grew divided. Some saw her as a renewal of the mother's living spirit, a call to humility in a society grown too certain of its virtue. Others viewed her as a threat to stability. They said she confused the people, that her vision blurred the sacred order separating temple from world. When Jesua entered Jerusalem at the Feast of Renewal, thousands came to see her. Some laid out woven palm ribbons and called her Anointed of the Mother. Rumours spread that she had declared herself Queen of the Jews, the living image of the divine. To the high matrons, this was heresy. No woman could claim to embody the mother. Divinity was principle, not person. She was arrested at night in the olive gardens beyond the city walls. The guards were uneasy because many had families who followed her, but the council's command was clear. Jesua was brought before the chamber of matrons and questioned for a full day. They asked, "Do you claim to be the daughter of the mother, the living goddess among us?" Jesua replied, "The mother is within me, as she is within you. But when you name me queen, you forget what I have taught. Her presence belongs to all." The council found her guilty of blasphemy and sedition. Some urged mercy, but others feared rebellion if she lived. By dusk, the sentence was pronounced: death by crucifixion, the punishment reserved for those who sought to unsettle the world. Jesua was led to a hill outside the city, where 2 others were already bound. The cross was not a symbol of glory, but of shame, a warning against dissent. As they raised her up, she looked upon the crowd, mothers, fathers, children, and those who had once sat beside her in the gardens. She spoke once more, her voice steady. "You have forgotten that the mother's spirit cannot be contained. Forgive them, for they do not see what they protect." At the 9th hour, she bowed her head. Witnesses said the wind changed and the air grew still. One of the guards, a young man from Nazara, whispered, "Surely the mother was with her." After Jesua's death, her body was set in a tomb carved from the rock of the southern wall. The council commanded it to be sealed and watched, lest her followers turn grief into uprising. But her disciples, Miriam of Magdala, Joanna and Salome, kept vigil nearby. As evening fell, they lit lamps and sang her hymns, certain that the mother's spirit could not die. At dawn on the 3rd day, the guards found the stone rolled aside. Inside, the shroud lay folded and untouched. Some said the earth had trembled, but others swore they saw a figure in white walking through the olive trees. The women returned to the city saying, "She lives, not in flesh but in spirit. Through her, the mother lives in us." News spread quickly. To some it was blasphemy, and to others, liberation. Jesua's words, once whispered in gardens, were now spoken in marketplaces and homes. Her followers formed small circles of study and care, meeting in secret at first, then in the open. They called themselves followers of the way, believing that through them the mother's wisdom was awakening again. Within a generation, the teachings of Jesua began to reshape the order. Some councils were dissolved, but others opened their seats to men for the first time. the idea of authority began to change, moving from birthright to understanding, and from lineage to learning. Jesua's crucifixion became the turning point of an age. It was not the end of matriarchy, but its transformation. Her death revealed what all systems forget, that when any truth becomes absolute, it betrays itself. Her resurrection was not just the return of one body, but the awakening of many minds. In time, temples were rebuilt as schools and gardens. The cross, once a symbol of punishment, became a sign of balance. It was the meeting of vertical and horizontal, heaven and earth, power and compassion. Those who followed Jesua said that every time two people met in understanding, she was there between them, not as queen nor prophet, but as the quiet reminder that creation belongs to all.